Let me show you first of all these lovely presents that I got. Today is the 15th of March and I was in Holland at Lauder Bonsai with three of my colleagues, Josh, Tibor and Tracy, and we had a lovely time, and so many of my YouTube fans I was privileged to meet, and I got some presents and this lovely Monet Hawaiian shirt from one of my YouTube fans who met me in Holland, so thank you very much. So that is going to be the subject of another long video about my visit to Lauder to demonstrate there. So what have I got here today? I wasn't going to do any videos today, but I had a customer bring a tree this morning to the nursery. Have a look at it. It's a classic Chinese juniper, and the story of a lot of the bonsai is very interesting to share with you. This tree used to be the tree that a 96-year-old lady owned until she died last year. And she left it with her granddaughter, and as is always the case, the granddaughter hadn't a clue as to what to do with it. She didn't even know that it's a juniper, but suffice it to say that her grandmother had it for maybe about 60 years, and I'm not surprised because back in 1961-62 there was a company in the UK called Bromwich & Young, and they were bringing in junipers like this, and they were sold in the 60s, £1 per foot. So you had a 2-foot tree was £2. Remind you, 1962 is almost 60 years ago. So in those days, money was worth much more than it is now. Anyway, so she may have paid like £2 in those days. And remember, in 1962, the average wage of most office workers was £6 a week. So it's 1/3 your weekly wage. So this is the story of this tree. And this tree has been in the UK since 1962 probably. And of course, junipers live very long. I've even had white pines that were brought in to the UK in those early years of the 60s, and they're still alive. So, like most people, they do all sorts of things to decorate their tree. That Chufa rock is doing nothing. Let's look at what can be done. So, this is not what one would imagine a bonsai to be. Projects like this I find very interesting because you are faced with a design problem and you have to find a solution to it. Because it is so gangly and all the tufts at the end, bare branches, it's not a classic S shape, it's nothing. It's just lots of long gangly branches. So the obvious solution for most people would be, I think you may have guessed it, make it into a raft to make a forest, which is possible. You'll get a forest about 1, 2, 3, that's 4, about 7 trees you can get from making this into a forest, but you'll get like a pom-pom type forest. And because this person, this granddaughter, wants a tree that looks like a conventional bonsai, making it into a raft or a forest, I don't think she would be very happy with. So this therefore stretches my imagination. It is a very challenging project, very, very challenging. And what can you do with a thing like that? While I'm thinking, let me clean the bark a little bit, see what happens. As I say, these junipers are very resilient. Juniper is probably easier to look after than a Japanese white pine because they can stand drought better and they're very hardy. So I dare say for most of its latter years, while this dear lady was reaching her 90s, it was probably not cared for very much, and yet it survives. So this tree has got a lot of potential still in it. So with most of these sort of trees, or as I always say, there's always more than one solution to this problem. So what I look for in a tree like this, I'm literally going to speak my mind. As I'm thinking, I'm going to talk my thoughts. So I'm looking at it and I look at the tree and see where can I find a nice trunk line, a trunk that looks curvy and nice, which got a lot of bends in it. What is the trunk line that looks nicest? So if I turn it around, I can see straight away that this side is not so curvy. If I turn it like this, it begins to look more interesting, curvy that way. And I can get more or less a conical shape. At the moment it's like an umbrella shape, like that, inverted V. I want to make it a more conventional V. So let's see what I can do. So just by a bit of bending of the branches with strong enough wire, I think I can create a better shape. Of course, this hasn't been repotted, I would dare say, for about, I think she said maybe about 30 years or more. It's not been repotted, so it needs a repot in another pot. So let's see what we can do. So my immediate plan is to try and create a conical shape with this tree. I can see that some branches are bendable, so let us try and bend those branches. So let us see with wire what we can do, possibly even using a branch splitter. What can be achieved with a branch splitter? Creating bonsai is about having vision. Like in anything, you've got to have a vision. If you want to start your own business, you want to start your career, you want to do anything in life, you have to have vision. You have to have foresight and a plan as to what you want to achieve. If you don't have vision or you don't have any plan, then whatever you do counts for nothing. You have to have vision to see what your end objective is. So my end objective here is to create a triangular looking tree which has a recognizable bonsai shape. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to see if I can bend the branches in a fashion that will create that image or shape. The angle is not too bad. I will keep the angle as it is. I can see straight away that I can open it out like this. Because so many twigs have died on this tree, I will show you another thing. If you home in close, you see all these burrs and snags. One little tip I give you, that if you clean them up, it makes the wiring far easier and simpler. If there are snags, the wiring becomes more difficult. So always clean the snags up, and that will help make your wiring a great deal simpler and easier. I can see that they've pruned some dead branches off. So that's the first thing you should always do with any project that you're embarking on. Of course, this is where the wire brush is very useful. This is the brass wire brush. It's used for cleaning the bark, especially on junipers. If you have craggy bark on a pine, never do it on a pine, because you want to preserve the craggy bark. Okay. There's another little stump there. I'm going to take that off. I'm not making a gin with short bits like that. Let me talk a little about wire cutters. This, believe it or not, is my favorite wire cutter. It's nice and small, easy to grip. I lost it the other day and I felt very upset because I wasn't used to using other wire cutters. This is a similar one, similar design. But for some reason, the shape and the size, although it's similar, is not as easy to hold as this one. So you get to know which wire cutter you like. These are heavy duty Japanese wire cutters. That's for cutting very thick wire, you know, something like 5, 6, 10 millimeter thick. So that has a separate purpose. For just general cutting of wire, I prefer these little wire cutters. Okay, so I'm going to try and create a shape that is more open, conical shape. So let us see what we can do. I'm going to always use 2-branch principle. I'm going to wire that branch and this branch. You see how I'm measuring the length of wire that I need. I'm going to go up to there. A lot of people have asked me, how do you know what length of wire to use? I think if you can keep it like about 10% longer than the length of the branches you want to wire, that is a very good rule of thumb. The only rules of thumb or guidelines, don't take it as gospel. As you work more in trees, you will get to know your own way of wiring, your own preferences, and that will work for you. How tightly you wire and the spacing also determines the length of wire that you use up. So, as I always say, in everything you do, there are no hard and fast rules. Everyone devises their own method which suits their own particular style of working. I hate it when people say, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. There's nothing got to about it. You do whatever suits you. As long as it works. You see, I've judged enough wire to come to the end of this thick branch, and from here on where it's thinner, I use thinner wire to wire that. So this is a lesson in wiring as well. Now this one again, there are some snags still on this branch. You see all these little snags here? I'm going to clean them up, make the wiring a bit easier. Carry on wiring. A lot of these projects, it's more the thinking or the brain power that is a problem, more so than anything else. The actual technicality of wiring and applying the wire, shaping, is only secondary. The solution is the key to the problem. We have a problem, we have to find a solution. So this is what we're going to do. Again, you see, I've judged how accurate was I. To judge the wire right to the end. I haven't cut any wire off. I hate it when people cut oodles of wire off and then it's thrown into the skip. Look at that. Not a centimeter wasted. Not a centimeter wasted to the very end. Okay, I'll slide that piece of wire, and for some reason I'm more or less homing in to this as the front. Let me mark the front. Let me mark the front somewhere here. Always better to use 2 bits of wire to mark it. Then your eye will be guided like so. 2 bits of wire, like so. Okay. Now, assuming I've used the right thickness, it should be able to bend and hold the branch in place. If not, I can always put another piece of wire to hold it. So that is the start of the base of the triangle. Because this is such an old tree, some of these branches could be 50 years old and it's no thicker than a pencil. So they could be very brittle. If you do hear it crack, it does happen. There's this very famous Japanese saying, even monkeys fall out of trees. So however clever you are, you can still have an accident. Okay, now this one comes this way. Now, we've got these two are very similar in thickness, so I'm going to wire these two. So this is the next thing to do. So you see how my thought process is working. So I want to wire those two, so the length of wire is about that long. I'll just show you how I use that heavy wire cutter. A good pair of wire cutters cuts through the wire like butter. Okay, so I'm going to wire these two branches. Okay, the two branch principle, I give a little anchor, and once I've anchored this one, and then I proceed to do the other branch in full. I don't ever attempt to wire the whole branch until I've got an anchor. Those of you who are very observant will have realized that the gin pliers I regard as one of my most essential tools. I place it on par with the scissors that I use for snipping branches. It is such a useful tool that I literally can't do without it. I'm forever resorting to the gin pliers to terminate the end of the wire. So let me take it to the thicker branch, and we will, with the gin pliers again, see the length of wire, again not a centimeter of wastage. How clever is that, Mr. Chan? I don't know how I do it, but from years of experience, I've been able to judge the right amount of wire to use for any particular situation without wasting an inch. Now, although it came from the same branch, I'm going to make this a second layer, different tier. And this I'm going to wire into flat pads where I can. So that is going to be the pad formation, which I'll get to. So I'm still creating the structure all the time. This dead bit could be a gin, I don't know. Let's see what happens. It could end up as a gin, it could end up as a branch. So let me just wire some of these pads to see if the pads will turn out nice. So I'm going to make these into pads. Not only should wire be efficient, but it should always do the job that you planned for the tree. So I'm going to see how I can get the maximum leverage or the best connection. Okay, I've got a thick branch here at this end. I'm going to take it all the way around. I'm bending some of these small twigs back on itself because it's quite bare inside. So if I bend it back on itself, I could create a tighter formation which will make the tree look less sparse, because at the moment all the little pom-pom branches have gone to the extremities. I want to bring it back on itself. I will try and keep the camera working throughout, because I don't want you to get the impression that I'm doing any magic or sleight of hand. So what you see is what you get. Tiny bit of wastage there. You see how I've made the pad now? Rather than a pom-pom at the end like that, I've now created a pad. If I tip the ends, it will force bud back further into the branch. So you got a pad now, whereas before there wasn't a pad. You can see the pad forming there, and over the time, next few months, if it buds back further, it'll fill that very nicely in there. So I've created that pad. Now let's see if I can create a pad with this bit. So I can still see that I have to do something with the top, but the base of the triangle I have started to fill out. I must say that when we were in Holland this past weekend, many of the trees that were brought for me to give opinion to work on are typical of the stuff that I do here. So thank you for all those who brought them, because you seem to have read my mind and given me challenging material. Okay, I'm going to wire this flat, so I'm not going to show you this. I'm going to wire this flat and wire this flat. To save on the video time, I'm going to do it and then I'll show it to you. And then the next major decision I will show you in a minute. So we've got to this stage. You can see that the conical shape is beginning to appear. I'm going to wire these 3 branches. So I'm going to start wiring these upright branches and create levels where there was none. I'm still cleaning the branches of all these snags. always come back to the front to see what I'm trying to achieve. Okay, what I want to do. We wire this one and that one. The wire I'm using, by the way, is 3.5 millimeter wire. But it's no good me telling you what I'm using because different branches have different degrees of flexibility, even though it may be the same diameter. If it's an older tree, older branch, it could be less pliable. And a pine is more flexible than a juniper. The older it is, the less pliable it is. And so it goes. You just got to judge each situation on its merits. What would we do without wire? Creating a bonsai would be very difficult indeed. You see, I'm using all these long branches to create different tiers of branches, not just one tier. So this branch has got about 2 tiers, may even end up with 3 tiers of branches. And then that's going to be a flat tier. Now that I've got the main branch wired, I'm now going to wire each of these little bits into pads. So I will stop videoing for a while we do the pads. So you've seen how we've created these level pads. I've got that. The conical shape is coming along nicely. And with this one, I might even bring it back onto it like this. Very stiff branches, which means that they could be brittle, so I've got to be ever so careful. And I want to do something with these 2 branches as well. And that one. So I got to decide how to wire it or bend it. Okay, so I can't decide whether to use a really thick piece of wire to do those 2. Let's see if it bends. So let me try that. Sometimes, as I've always pointed out, 2 slightly thinner pieces of wire can be more effective than a very thick one. I don't know why it is. It's like reinforcement, isn't it? Okay, I've got an anchor there. And then I'll take it around here. There are so many snags, the old dead branches. The little stubs make the wiring very difficult. Talking of wiring, there are some people who refuse to do bonsai using wire. I think it's very difficult to achieve anything without the use of wire. So this is where we've got to so far. You can see this side of the triangle is almost perfect. And I've created a little bend here, I've created a little bend here. But I need to decide what to do with that back part. I don't want the lines to conflict with each other. I want to be sympathetic with the rest of the tree. All the branches bending in the same way. Movement, what we call movement. Movement is the most important thing. And of course, by applying the right grade of wire, we can get the movement right. So I've got a little head. You see how much tighter the whole tree now looks. These pads have still to be formed to fill in the space. What to do with this one here? I can bring it back on itself like that. So let me do a bit of jiggery pokery with thick wire. Bend this back on itself and see what transpires. So what do you want to use? Use I think 3.5. That and that. So I've done that bit of wiring. Now let's see if I can bring it tighter into the triangle. So you see, I've now achieved the overall triangular shape just by manipulating the branches so that it forces the triangular shape. All is not done yet. I've still got to sort this pad out, but you can see more or less how the triangular shape has been recreated. I'm sure this is what it could have looked like in its early days, and it's quite different from what it started off with. If I compare the photographs, I've just got to wire those, and the bulk of it is done. So this is where I've got to. You can see we've tightened the whole thing, and I've managed to create a triangular shape. This dead branch here, I will probably gin. I won't waste your time showing you how to strip the bark. You know what it's all about. When it's all done, I'll get one of my staff to do that. And this back branch here, which is half dead, I may keep it. If the customer wants to make a gin, they can make a gin with it. So that will also be kept. Now let's look at the roots to see what the roots are like. So it's not been repotted, I would say, for at least 20-30 years. And this tree, as I told you, has been in this country for 60 years, since the early 1960s. So it's time it had a repot. So let's see what the condition of the roots are. This black soil, my goodness. So you can see the condition. See, the roots are live, but it's badly in need of repotting. See, the roots are alive, but we need to take at least a third of the roots, of the old soil out, and do it. Again, I don't want to show you the actual repotting, because that is, I think, a waste of valuable video time. And the pot I've chosen is going to be a deeper pot, because I want to bring the tree back to health, so I want to put it in that pot. So when it's all done, I'll take a final shot. Okay. So here is the final tree. I potted it in a new pot. It's slightly larger than I would normally use, but because this tree was stressed so much, I think I will give it more room to grow and strengthen the tree once again. So from an inverted triangle, I will try and get the editor to show a before and after shot. You can see how this tree has been transformed. I know there are little bits that I can still tinker with, like pruning these downward hanging twigs. These are only minor cosmetic effects, but you get the general idea. So from an inverted triangle, I've managed to get it back into more of the semblance of a tree. So although the branches are not all horizontal, they are creating the triangular shape, which makes the tree work. So I hope you're not too disappointed, and I'm sure the customer will be very happy too. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this one.